The Green River in northeastern Utah near the little tiny town of Dutch John has emerged as one of the premier trout streams in the United States. This is a river that by some estimates is home to over 22,000 trout per mile of water. It is one of the most prolific fisheries in the entire Rocky Mountain area and indeed within the United States. Fly fishers come from all over the world to sample this fine fishery, and guides come from miles around to service them, to take them onto the river and to show them the wheres, the hows, and the whys of this particular river. One of the things that's a real bonus, I think, to this particular fishery is that it occurs in particularly beautiful surroundings. You have steep canyon walls, very rocky terrain, and yet the pine trees that allows for nice smell of pine down on the river as you float along the water, and it is very often sheltered from the wind. You do get some wind down there, but the high canyon walls at times can protect you from an area that's particularly windy. Whereas a good way to experience the river is to float from the dam down to Little Hole, for instance, a distance of 7 miles. You don't give up too much if you fish off the bank. So the wade fisherman has probably as good a fishing as the person who's floating the river. And the fish are lunker size. You can see by this particular fish that this is probably several to 3 pounds of fighting rainbow trout. Many of the fish are released, which keeps that population nice and high. If you want to come and fish the Green River, there's places to stay close by, especially at Flaming Gorge Lodge, or there's some just spectacular campgrounds, both on Flaming Gorge Reservoir and down on the river itself. Several of them that overlook the river. You can rent rafts from Flaming Gorge Lodge, and they will also provide shuttle service for you. So they can do your shuttling, they can rent you a raft, or if you just prefer to walk down and fish the river, that's perfectly fine too. You certainly don't have to go very far to find fish, so that's not going to be a problem. You will find that you are not close to any large metropolitan area, so just about everybody has to travel some distance to get to this river. On the other hand, you're not going to find a lack of company, because this river is becoming more famous every day, but there are plenty of fish for everybody, and the river's big enough to give everybody a chance to do a little fishing and not really interfere with somebody else, so that doesn't necessarily have to be a problem to you. Last spring, Bill Browning and I arranged to meet Ron Smith and Andy Anderson down on the Green for a little bit of fishing. And by golly, we couldn't have had a nicer day. The day dawned nice and sunny. Got down in the water. It was not particularly cold for the springtime in the Rockies. And almost on the first cast, Bill was into a nice fish. It was nothing better than hear that reel sing early in the morning and know that the fishing probably that day is going to be pretty good. We did notice almost immediately, however, that the fish had been foul hooked. This is a hazard on a river that has the incredible population of fish that this river has. If you fish a nymph deep in the water, the chances are sometime during the day, inadvertently, you're going to foul hook a fish. It can be particularly difficult to land when you hook a dorsal fin. That sure does give them a lot of leverage on you. We like to use a short line nymphing technique on this river. Good flies might be a 12 or 14 weighted hare's ear, or some sort of a scud or freshwater shrimp pattern, which abound in this particular water. What you need to do is to use a short line and just cast out that fly with enough weight so that you're occasionally touching the bottom. Maybe every second time you want to touch the bottom with your fly or with your weight so that you know you're getting that fly on the bottom. If the fish are not rising, they're not going to be in the middle water. They're almost always going to be on the bottom. So you got to get the fly down to them. They feed rather readily, and so like I say, if you can get the fly to the fish, and very often in this clear water, you're going to be able to see the fish laying down on the bottom. So you're going to see the target. You're going to know where you have to cast to get that fly to the fish. But what a beautiful rainbow trout this is.
He's fishing.
Now, if your cast is on and you're getting the fly down to the fish, all you got to do is watch that strike indicator, and anything that it does that doesn't look right, you're going to have to react to. Something else, by the way, that you might try. If you have the time, the inclination, and the money, and you can hire a good guide, you're going to find more. You can learn more in a day on the river than you could learn by yourself in a month. Now, this is exactly, again, what we're trying to do here. I'm showing Bill something of what I've learned of the river, but I'm in a good spot. I can see some good fish out in front of me. I'm just letting that line float back in on me, and I'm just kind of watching for any pause and reacting to it. And you'll see that rod jerk. If something doesn't seem right, you have to react to it. The takes can be extremely subtle. Sometimes it's no more than just the very slightest pause in your line, or the leader just jerks a little teeny bit, but like I say, you would be surprised at how subtle the take of a trout is when it stops that nymph. And sometimes that's all it does, just stop that fly just for an instant, and then the line's floating again. So you have to react to that. And sometimes you get lucky, and by golly, you have a nice fish on the end of the line. The fish in the upper section are predominantly rainbow trout with quite a few cutthroats mixed in. As you get down toward Little Hole, which is 7 miles away, you find brown trout and brook trout. So you can potentially in a day catch the 4 different species of trout that occur in the western United States. You want to be a little bit careful about how you wade this river. It's not a dangerous river to wade, but at the same time there are some deep spots, and you want to be a little careful. I found that to adequately land this fish, I had to move over just a little because I was standing in a big hole. But you can see that in this cold water, these fish are really feisty, and boy is it fun to catch them. Not only that, I think they're some of the prettiest fish that I have ever seen. They have just got all sorts of color. And some rivers, it's funny, some rivers you get really pretty color in. There are other rivers where the fish really are fairly plain. But like I say, you'll find that these fish are well colored, and they're also well proportioned. Most of them are just fat pigs is what they are. Some of them start to look like guppies. They have so much weight on them. And again, we're doing the same thing. Fish aren't feeding on the surface, so we're looking for those fish on the bottom. And then that line upstream, let that indicator float. Slight pause at some point. There it is, sets the hook, we've got a fish on. It's just as simple as that. It isn't any harder than it looks. I think very often when we're nymph fishing, a lot of people think there's some sort of mystery to that. There really isn't. You've got to make sure that you get your fly on the bottom, that you've got enough weight to do that. You've got to lead the fish enough to allow that fly to sink to the level of the fish itself, and then all you've got to do is to react to your line. Very seldom do you see the fish actually take your fly underwater, even in very clear water like this. It's too difficult. Even if you can see the fish you're fishing to, it's very difficult to see them actually take the fly. But what you can see is your leader and your line, and you can react to that. And that's going to tell you when that fish has that fly. But remember, it's going to be a very faint pause usually, just very, very subtle. So you have to learn to react to that. Nice fish, Bill. As you're floating along, or if you get up on a high ledge, you can look down on the river and you're going to see fish laying every place. From the camera angle, it's hard to see many except that one fish, and you just saw that fish react to the boat. But as you float over some of these crystalline pools, you're going to find that there are all sorts of fish on the bottom of this river. Times when you have trouble catching fish, you say to yourself, how in the world could I not catch fish when there's so many of them out there? That can be the frustrating part of this river. When they go dead, sometimes they go real dead, and you won't catch fish for an hour or two at a time sometimes. And when that happens, like I say, you think to yourself, boy, I mustn't be very good as far as this fly fishing is concerned, because there's sure plenty of them for the opportunity out there. On the other hand, what do they say? Don't blame the fish. They're there, and they're feeding most of the time. This can be pretty exciting. That water's cold, by the way. It's warm enough for the fish and for the insect life that keeps these fish fed up to the point where they're so well conditioned, and it takes a tremendous amount of feed to be able to maintain this many trout and keep them in such fantastic condition. The average fish in this river is probably easily 14 to 16 inches, with many, many fish running between 16 and 20 inches even. And the chances of hooking that fish of a lifetime certainly exist. Fish well over 10 pounds have been caught on this river. You'll find when you get yourself in a position where you're pretty much out in the current that any fish you catch, even if it's not a particularly large one, is going to give a pretty good account of himself. On this particular morning, it seemed we could absolutely do no wrong. As Bill is releasing his fish at this particular point, we look over and we hear Ron Smith yell, "One's got me." And as we look at him, we find that he's got a fish on that's cavorting down through the rapids below us, and he's pretty well out of control. He's trying to hold that fish and not let him get into that quick water. But the fish has gotten into the white water, and you can see the rod pulse as it strips off line. And the rod starts to take on that funny flat look. When you've really got a lot of load on your rod, it will do that. Look at that tip, how flat it is, and how straight that line comes off that tip. That means that he's got all of his fly line and probably about 50 or 75 yards of his backing in that fish. And at this particular point, he has no choice but to begin to follow that fish. I'm not sure who's reeling in who. It's for sure that the fish isn't moving, but Ron's on the move. He's got to go follow that one. It's too big for him to have any hope to ever bring that fish up through that heavy water. You know, as pretty as the river is, there's times where you just about forget to fish, even though you have fish all around you. There comes the time of the day when you've caught enough so that kind of the edge is off, you know kind of what I mean. And at that point, you start looking around you and you just see some really beautiful western scenery. You've got the stark cliffs, rock cliffs, but at the same time, you've got the nice clean water. You've got the pines along the side of the river and climbing up to the canyon walls above, and it is just a spectacular setting. I can't think of any place that I'd rather spend a few days. I've been on a lot of rivers around the world, but this is a good one. This is not, by the way, a dangerous river to float, particularly in the top 7 miles. You can float yourself. Not too many places you can get into trouble, especially if you remember, when in doubt, stay on the right. That'll keep you out of most problems. And like I say, if you get the inclination, you can float yourself. By the way, it is a law that any craft on the river, that any of the occupants in that craft have life preservers, and that they be wearing them. So it doesn't matter if you're float tubing or if you're in a boat or a raft, you have to have your life vest on. That afternoon, the fish start to work on the surface. And as much fun as it is to take a fish on a nymph, I think it's a little bit more fun to take them on the surface when you can. Very often, especially in the spring, you're going to find that the fish are working a little blue wing olive, dry fly. Maybe a 16 would be a good size to try, or might be that one of the spinner imitations will work well. Talk to somebody up at the fly shop, and they can usually put you on to what it is that you want to be fishing. But that afternoon, as good as the fishing was in the morning, it was that good that afternoon, except now we were fishing dry flies. When you're going to release a trout, really a good idea to do everything you can not to manhandle the fish. The fish are really pretty hardy so long as you don't squeeze them very tightly, and so long as you handle them just as gently as you possibly can. Don't keep them out of the water any longer than you absolutely have to. And you're going to find that that's a fish that's going to be able to come back and fight another day. And that's going to keep this river in good, healthy shape. This fish, as you can see, is still pretty feisty, and whereas I want to make sure that he's okay, he proves to me pretty quickly that he's not having any problems, so he swims away in good shape. Again, the beauty of the Green River below Flaming Gorge is just astonishing. This corner, which you can't help but find, which is about 4.5 miles below the put-in, is always worth stopping. There's a big boulder patch that runs through there, and there are some particularly big brown trout and rainbows and cutthroats and a few pretty good-sized brook trout that live through this run of about 200 yards in one of the prettiest spots in the entire river. So, if you get the chance and you get the urge, I definitely suggest that you put the Green River in northeastern Utah on your list of trips you want to do.